Well, I'm on my voice. It is now Sunday morning, and the snow has not let up. It's about 6.5 feet deep, I think. I'm held up here in the Jeep. I just want to come home.
This is the video of 46-year-old Paula Lane, recorded for her mother and 11-year-old twin boys days after being stranded in the middle of nowhere from an intense snowstorm. Her situation was extremely dire, to the point where she could lose her life at any moment. And this recording was her way of leaving a final message to her family, something she never expected she'd have to do. Things started off quite normal on November 29, 2012, when Paula and her 44-year-old boyfriend Roderick Clifton were staying at his mother's house in Citrus Heights, California. Paula's mother had invited the two for dinner that day, so the two packed their stuff and began the over 100-mile or 160-kilometer journey to her place in Gardnerville, Nevada. The route went through the mountains, and because of this, they made a couple stops along the way to admire the views. But even with these breaks, they were still on pace to reach their destination long before dinner. So, with some time to spare, Rod decided to go on a brief detour. Instead of continuing on the highway, they got on the road leading to Burnside Lake. And that's when they ran into the first hurdle of this trip, a roadblock. The path to Burnside Lake was closed off by a gate as well as a thick sheet of ice. It had been long closed for the season. Rod was intimately familiar with the path ahead since the couple often camped at Burnside Lake with their kids in the summertime. Plus, he also wanted to test the off-roading snow capabilities of his new Jeep. So he chose to ignore the gate and drove around it, a decision he would sadly come to regret not long after. Things went smoothly at first, allowing them to reach the lake at around 7 p.m. Unfortunately, the snow near the lake was deeper and softer than they expected, resulting in the Jeep's front left tire getting stuck as they were turning around to leave. The two tried everything in their power to free it for multiple hours, but were completely unsuccessful. And that was only the beginning of their troubles. Things went from bad to worse when the temperature started dropping rapidly, which the two weren't prepared for at all. It was around 60 degrees Fahrenheit or about 15 Celsius when they left earlier that day, so they were wearing fall clothes with jeans and light jackets. They also had no plans of camping, so they didn't have any food or fresh water. To top it all off, there was no cell service in that area either, preventing them from calling for help. With no other options, they decided to spend the night huddled in the Jeep and wait out the bad weather. Unfortunately, that region experienced an intense snowstorm that night, making their already dire situation even more critical. After trying and failing to free the Jeep once again on November 30th, Rod decided to go look for help on foot instead. It was a nearly 6-mile or about 9.6-kilometer trek to the highway. The snow was also waist deep on some sections of the path, so Rod put on as many warm clothes as he could, wrapped his shoes in plastic bags to avoid getting them wet in the snow, and promised Paula that he would be back with help in a few hours. Sadly, he did not come back. Back in the Jeep, Paula's situation wasn't looking very good either. In addition to being worried about Rod, she also had almost nothing to keep herself alive. The only food in the vehicle was a small bag of fresh green tomatoes Rod's mother had given them before they departed. Over the next couple of days, Paula survived by eating 1 or 2 tomatoes a day, eating the snow for hydration, and wrapping herself in as many clothes and blankets as she could find in the car. Unfortunately, the weather wasn't letting up one bit, causing her to slowly lose any hope of survival, and eventually use the remaining battery on her camera to record this message to her family on December 1st.
I'm on my voice. It is now Sunday morning, and the snow has not let up. It's about 6.5 feet deep, I think. I'm held up here in the Jeep. I'm eating a green tomato a day. I'm eating as much snow as I can remember to, and trying to stay warm. I just want to come home. Rod left Friday morning. Today's Sunday. Rod left Friday morning to go get help and didn't come back. I don't know what happened to him. I don't know if he got hypothermia and frostbite, or if some critter got him. But I can't walk out in this because I don't have the clothing. I just want to see my babies and my mom. I'm so sorry this has happened. But as soon as The sun comes out, I'm going to have to try to make it. It's 7 miles and 6 feet of snow. I don't think I'm going to do so well, but nobody's ever going to find me here at Burnside Lake.
Luckily, the storm subsided on the morning of December 2nd, giving Paula the will to save herself from the situation. So she packed her backpack with essentials like scissors and a flashlight, made makeshift gloves and socks with masking tape and tissue, and set out to find help on her own. However, the way back was even more challenging than she could have imagined. She was sinking into the snow with every step, forcing her to crawl on the snow with the help of her backpack instead. However, her body was already incredibly weak from the days of near starvation and cold exposure, and crawling through snow only made things worse. Hours into her trek, she was already beginning to lose feeling in her hands and feet. She was also coughing up blood and struggling to stay conscious. And if all that wasn't bad enough, the snowstorm came back as well, forcing Paula to take shelter in a spider-infested hollow tree on the ground. She spent 2 more nights in that tree, trying to recover enough strength to continue making her way back. Unfortunately, she had already run out of tomatoes, which was her only food source, and was barely alive at this point. But on December 5th, 6 days after the couple was stranded in the woods, Paula made a final-ditch effort to save herself. She left the hollow tree and began crawling with all she had left. And that's when she made a devastating discovery. Not far from the tree, she came across the remains of Rod covered in snow. He had likely developed hypothermia and passed away hours after leaving to get help. However, as heartbreaking as this discovery was, it also served as a motivator for Paula, giving her the courage to continue crawling forward so she didn't meet the same fate. Now, an important thing to note here is that the rescue efforts to find Paula and Rod had begun the night they disappeared. But since they didn't tell anyone about the detour to the lake, no one knew exactly where to look for them along the 100+ mile-long path they could have taken. The harsh weather also made it impossible to search for them via helicopter. Fortunately, Paula's brother, Gary, knew about their previous summer visits to the lake. So, on the 5th of December, he went to check out the lake area by himself. And after 6 long days, finally found his sister crawling on the road while on the verge of losing her life. It was starting to rain, and she would have more than likely passed away from hypothermia and exhaustion if Gary had found her even 15 minutes later. Luckily, he spotted her in time and rushed her to a nearby hospital where she was treated for first-degree frostbite. Paula has since managed to make a full recovery and is now living with her family and children. On the morning of October 15, 2016, 41-year-old Kevin Diepenbrock went on a scenic bike ride with his close friend and coworker Philip Polito. The plan was to ride across the Dragon, an 11-mile stretch of Route 129 near the Tennessee-North Carolina border that's infamous for its constant winding paths. It's as dangerous as it is beautiful. The surrounding foliage makes it one of the most picturesque riding spots in all of the US. But this foliage also reduces the already limited visibility, making even a single mistake on this road potentially lethal. Kevin had decades of experience riding bikes and was fairly confident in his ability to ride safely. However, he had no way of preparing for what was about to happen. A few minutes into the ride, Philip accidentally entered a turn too fast and was about to cross the yellow line. He slammed on the brakes to avoid going in the opposite lane. Unfortunately, due to the low visibility, by the time Kevin noticed, it was already too late. He slammed into Philip from behind, sending both riders and their bikes careening off the road and into a ravine 100 feet below. Philip sadly passed away minutes, if not seconds, after the crash. But Kevin somehow didn't. He survived, though now left alone in the ravine, hoping someone would spot him and help. He didn't know the full extent of his injuries at the time, but they were severe enough to render him completely immobile. The worst part about this was the fact that he could clearly hear hundreds of bikes and cars drive past him on the road above. But his injuries, later found out to be internal organ injuries, made it nearly impossible for him to shout loud enough to get their attention. There was nothing he could do. To make matters worse, he wasn't getting a cell signal in that location either. He tried everything from calling for help to sending text messages to his friends and family, and even attempting to update his status on Facebook. Sadly, none of it worked, making his hopes of getting rescued diminish as time went on. After exhausting all other options, Kevin accepted what was coming and decided to use the last of his strength to record a goodbye message for his family.
Hey everybody. That's all I can really say. About 10:30 this morning. Been laying here ever since.
He started by expressing his love to his parents, wife, and children, telling them to take care of themselves.
Just want to say I love you guys. Sorry I was being stupid. But, you know, that's what I do. Mom, Dad, love you. Courtney, love you. Kurt and Marnie, Karen, Matt, love you guys. Take care.
The second half of the recording was devoted to his dogs, but this section also revealed signs of his injuries slowly deteriorating his cognitive function.
Take care of the puppies for me too. Give Kimber and Ruger lots of love for me. And Rocco, Notch, and Kimber, Rocco, Notch, and Tango. I miss you guys.
However, despite accepting what seemed like an inevitable end at this point, Kevin did not give up. He kept trying everything in his power to get someone's attention, even as it became completely dark outside.
Hey, 7 o'clock. Trying to use my flashlight to wave somebody down.
He also tried to get up at some point, but the pain from his injuries made him lose consciousness the moment he shifted even slightly. Kevin was also becoming more and more dehydrated as time went by, resulting in even more exhaustion and making it difficult for him to stay conscious.
Hey, I'm at 10% body, 10% battery. It's 11 o'clock. I love you. I don't know what to say.
The weather in that area can also be extremely unpredictable, and there would have been no way for him to fend off hypothermia if the temperature dropped drastically that night. But no matter how bad his situation became, Kevin was determined to keep trying until the very end. And after nearly 30 hours of hearing bikes and cars drive by right next to him, his efforts finally paid off. The next morning, Kevin heard a bike stop near the crash site. It was a young couple that stopped to admire the view from that location. So he began shouting for help with all of the remaining strength in his body, successfully alerting the couple, who then called for more help. He was airlifted to a nearby hospital where the full extent of his injuries became clear. According to the medical report, both of his lungs were punctured and he had 17 fractures in 12 of his ribs, 2 breaks in his spine, and numerous road rash burns across his body. Fortunately, doctors were able to treat him successfully, allowing him to return home in about 3 weeks. On July 17, 2020, at around 5 p.m., 67-year-old Robert Ringo was driving alongside the Joshua Tree National Park in California when he noticed an interesting rock formation deep in the park. He wanted to take a closer look at it, so he parked his truck to the side, gathered his hiking gear, and began walking toward the landmark he'd spotted. Now, hiking in the desert like this in the middle of July is already risky enough on its own. Heat stroke is a very real possibility with each step you take. The high temperatures can also dehydrate you faster than you expect, making you feel dizzy, pass out, and eventually pass away. Robert was a desert hiking expert with decades of experience under his belt. However, because this was meant to be a short, barely hour-long detour, he brought only the bare essentials with him into the park. And while this would have been fine under normal circumstances, the situation Robert soon found himself in was anything but normal. As he was hiking to the rock formation, he accidentally slipped off a short ledge and landed directly on his left leg. The fall fractured his left femur, making him completely immobile in 115 degrees Fahrenheit or about 46 Celsius desert heat. Any attempt to move himself resulted in excruciating pain that nearly made him pass out, which would have been a death sentence in that situation. So Robert kept his calm. He tied his leg with the materials he had on him to stabilize the fracture, and also created a makeshift shelter to protect himself from the heat before calling for help.
Help! Help!
Sadly, there wasn't anyone within miles to hear his calls for help. He also had no cell service in the park, so calling 911 wasn't an option either. Due to it being a relatively short hike, he only brought 2 liters of water and no food. This was enough to keep him alive in the short term, but with the intense desert heat, it wasn't going to last very long. And that's exactly what happened. He spent the entire day and night in the exact same spot, and by the time the sun came up the next day, he had barely any water left. As I mentioned earlier, the hot and dry desert air is extremely dehydrating, something Robert was beginning to experience himself while recording what he thought could be his final goodbye message to his family.
It's the first time in my life I've ever experienced no saliva.
He also talked about the details of what had happened to him in this recording, just so his family could know exactly what happened in case he didn't make it.
I landed right on my left hip. I can't move it for the pain. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get up, but I'm sure they'll be out looking for me tonight.
That said, heat exhaustion was only one of the dangers Robert was facing in that desert. There was also a very real risk of getting bitten by one of the venomous rattlesnake species found in the Joshua Tree Park, or getting attacked by a wild animal like a coyote. But despite these dangers, Robert still had some hope of being rescued. That's because he'd actually sent his location to his son Ryan before heading into the park. And sure enough, Ryan was quick to report his father missing, leading to over 30 rescue workers looking for him by the next morning. However, it would have been extremely difficult to spot Robert hidden in rocks and bushes, even with so many people looking for him, especially since he wasn't following any predetermined hiking paths when the incident happened. And Robert knew this well, so he secured his broken leg as well as he could, gathered his strength, and started crawling backwards with his arms. He was only able to move a couple of feet per minute and was now exposed to the sizzling desert sun as well. But he knew that it was the only way and kept pushing himself, even eating juniper berries he found along the way to slow down dehydration. He reached an open plateau by 11 p.m. that night before going to sleep. And thanks to his effort, a rescue helicopter was able to spot him at around 9 a.m. the next morning. After spending 40 hours stranded in the desert, Robert Ringo was finally safe with his family. His leg also healed without any complications, allowing him to continue his love of hiking. Southwest Airlines Flight 1380 departed from New York on April 17, 2018. It was headed to Dallas, Texas, 1,390 miles or roughly 2,200 kilometers away. The Boeing 737-700 plane took off at around 10:43 a.m., and things went as expected at first. But then, at 11:03 a.m., 20 minutes into the flight, the left engine failed with a violent explosion 32,000 feet or 9,800 meters in the air. Shrapnel from this explosion hit the cabin, cracking one of the windows. The sudden drop in pressure forced one of the passengers, 43-year-old Jennifer Riordan, partially out of the broken window. Once outside, she was struck by more shrapnel from the engine and tragically passed away. However, Jennifer's passing was only the beginning of the issue at hand. Between the exploded engine and the depressurized cabin, a crash was looking inevitable, which would have resulted in the loss of most, if not all, the lives aboard that plane. One of the passengers, Marty Martinez, feared this as well. All he could think about was the family he was about to leave behind, especially his wife and his unborn son. So, in a moment of desperation, Marty took out his wallet and used his credit card to purchase the on-flight Wi-Fi as the plane was going down. He then used this barely functioning internet connection to start a live stream on Facebook so his friends and family could see him one last time. The stream was titled, "Something is wrong with our plane. It appears we are going down. Emergency landing. Southwest flight from New York City to Dallas." It showed the entire cabin in utter chaos, with every passenger scrambling to put on their oxygen mask. The passengers' panic and screaming could also be heard in the background of his choppy stream. And while Marty didn't say anything on stream due to the oxygen mask, he did send messages to his loved ones, telling them goodbye, writing, "I want you to know that I love you all and thank you for all you've done. I'm so sorry, plane's going down, I love you guys." He later explained his mindset in that moment during an interview, stating, "I literally bought Wi-Fi as the plane was going down because I wanted to be able to reach the people I loved, thinking these were my final moments on Earth. And put in the position to have to prioritize the people I loved to send them my final words was an absolutely gut-wrenching feeling. So I thought to Facebook Live my experience, thinking this would be my last communication with the people I loved and my team back home. All I was thinking about was telling my parents that I loved them. I felt like I had minutes left. I was bracing for an explosion." And his fear was completely justified. This wasn't a case of the engine temporarily stalling or experiencing some small issues. The plane had suffered a catastrophic failure, and there was nothing the pilots or the air traffic control could do to fix it tens of thousands of feet in the air. Later investigation revealed that one of the fan blades on the left engine had been developing an extremely small fatigue crack over the past few years. This blade and the engine as a whole was checked regularly for any damage, but the method they were using wasn't precise enough to detect this nearly invisible crack, which was a critical problem. Each of these fan blades weighs up to 11 pounds or nearly 5 kilograms and spin at anywhere between 2,200 and 4,500 RPM during normal operation. At those speeds, even a microscopic imperfection can compromise the blades and by extension the engine's structural integrity. And that's exactly what happened to Flight 1380. The blade with the small fatigue crack finally reached its breaking point. It tore off mid-flight and struck the rest of the engine at an insane speed, triggering a shockwave that caused the entire unit to fail in a single instant. Fortunately, the explosion Marty was bracing for never happened. The damage didn't reach the second engine, allowing pilots to retain partial control of the plane. They were also very close to the Philadelphia International Airport when the issue occurred, enabling them to perform an emergency landing and prevent any further casualties, giving Marty and all other passengers and crew members a second shot at life.